Hey everybody, Evan Kirstel here today with Tom, the influencer marketer. Tom, how are you?
I'm doing good, buddy. How are you?
I'm living the dream as always, but happy holidays, Merry Christmas, almost Happy New Year, all that good stuff. You and I know each other a while, and I always admire your work. We're going to dive into 2024 sort of insights, predictions, trends, opportunities in influencer marketing, content creation, B2B marketing, and beyond. Before that, Tom, maybe introduce yourself, your work as a consultant, and anything else on your mind.
Yeah, sure. Well, as Evan just said, my name is Tom Augenthaler, and I am a B2B influence marketer. And I've been in this field for about, oh, gee, 2010 or so. So it's been quite a while. I started with influencer marketing when I was with HP and part of their corporate PR team. And transitioned into the influencer thing while there and have been doing it ever since. So now I consult out to B2B SaaS companies for the most part and help them with their influencer programs and campaigns and strategy and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, it is good stuff, and I don't have much time to like teach people to fish. I'm more out there kind of fishing every day. So we make a good team. You know, you're out there providing the strategy, the guidance, which is no small task, and I'm out there just doing my thing. Um, Maybe let's talk about some of the top trends that I've seen this year that are going to accelerate in 2024. Let's start with what we're doing now: video everywhere, all the time, all at once. It's it's not just the TikTokers and the YouTubers. It's B2B now as well. What do you think?
I agree with you. I think video is like, I think in the B2B realm, it's still catching up a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
On the consumer side, it's pretty well established. I think every one of us probably has our favorite YouTube channels, which we're going to all the time, and probably prefer those to regular TV in many cases because the content is better and it's more, pointed in or focused in on things or topics, hobbies, things like that that we enjoy doing. On the B2B side, though, it is growing. I think we're seeing more and more of it on LinkedIn here, where you do a lot of your work. I think that we're still seeing it grow a bit on places like, well, I don't know, what do we call it, X or Twitter or whatever anymore? I don't know
I
what the
call it Twitter. I'm not going to X, but so for me,
Yeah, I
I'm
like Twitter.
Twitter.
The name Twitter to me just it's a real word, it's a name, so we can work with that. Anyway, so you're seeing it there. I think that we're starting to see some of it grow on YouTube as well, although that seems to be a little bit slower for whatever reason. But it's a major component that I think every company should be looking at. Either they're putting out their own live streams like you do all the time, or getting onto live streams as a guest, which I sometimes have been able to do with you, which is you've been very kind to work with my clients and have them on as guests. But I think that those are just a couple of the opportunities that are there for companies to really cherry pick and work with going forward.
Yeah, I would agree. And video is not created equally. I think we're talking in this case live video, which is really
Mhm.
where the action is. And it's not just because we might screw up at any moment, and it's exciting for the audience to watch us say an f bomb or whatever, but it's because the algorithms they preference live traffic. They want that live traffic. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, they all have live platforms. And with this tool, I'm not an ad here for StreamYard, but you can go out on all those platforms simultaneously, and it leaves a post, and it's one click on all, and live just gets 10x more reach than those highly curated, highly produced 60-second videos, which we'll talk about later. But you see everywhere, and I think a lot of B2B brands are terrified of live video for obvious reasons. You say or do the wrong thing, or it's a technical glitches, but you just can't beat the reach and engagement, particularly on YouTube, which is all about live, and on TikTok and on Instagram. And okay, these are mainly B2C platforms, but they're so giant, they're so huge that even a tiny percent of the audience there is pretty significant. And you can do things storytelling wise with video and video and add in slides and little special effects. There are things you can do on these platforms which are really interesting and engaging. So yeah, video all the time, and I think you're much more authentic. I think when you're live, you're not reading a script, you're not staring into a teleprompter. Like actually, teleprompters are a thing at home, working from home now, and so you just have a certain direct appeal to the audience that is interesting. So you have comments. We may have a few live. You can see how many people are viewing and engaging right here. So many, many reasons why live is the platform of choice. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next, short insight for 2024?
You made a great a point about the fear factor with live video, and
Mm,
for the point of view of a company that's a real thing. I think you've got it from a couple of different angles internally in a company, and one of them is, oh my gosh, if I say the wrong thing, is the management going to get mad at me, and am I going to get the merits or whatever? The other thing is, I think sometimes I don't know what to talk about, which is funny enough, but most of these companies are experts at what they do, or they have a whole host of
mm,
experts, and all they have to really do is talk about how they service their clients, and how, the ways in which they do that, and the kind of technology they're using to do that, and people are really pretty interested in that. You don't have to get into all this other stuff really. You could just hone in on those stories like you just mentioned, and you'd be fine. I mean, that's actually, if you talked about, well, I have XYZ client and this is how we worked with them and we helped them overcome these challenges. Well, that's really helpful to a lot of other companies out there that might be thinking about doing the same thing. So that's the way I would approach it.
yeah, I would totally agree. And I view live as sort of a platform because you can take this live video, and this is what I do with the different Gen AI tools that are out there now, which really came online in this year. And you can turn it magically into an audio podcast
Hmm.
with all the leveling and the editing done through AI. Then that gets on the players, the Spotify's and iTunes and a dozen other, 20 other audio platforms. And then you can take the transcript and then magically turn that into a blog using the Gen AI tools. And I can give you DM me if you want a list of the tools I use, but there's hundreds of them. So all of a sudden, with one live engagement, you have long form video. You can use tools to find highlights, and you have your short form video for reels or what have you, TikTok. You have the written word and you have the spoken word.
Hmm.
And you have 15 pieces of content. So it's a really powerful way to build content versus the kind of one-off handcrafted approach that we've seen in B2B.
Exactly. And I think that if companies just kind of embrace that thinking, they would they'd be able to produce a lot better content more quickly, without it being all sort of buttoned up and corporate and everything, and it'd be just a little bit more relatable to everybody because it's just the people internally that are on these live streams, that you can kind of get to know a little bit. You can kind of relate to them, and maybe even connect with them on LinkedIn, which is a great platform for all this stuff. So I mean, I live on LinkedIn. In terms of a social media platform, LinkedIn is my home, if you want to call it that, my virtual home, my virtual community. It's just so powerful. It's got so many great things going for it. No matter what the problems with it might be, it's just it's made business a lot easier. Let's put it that way.
No, LinkedIn's a place to be, and they've really doubled down on live, obviously, live drop in audio as well. But I think brands are kind of missing the mark because they're just posting what they post everywhere. They're not looking at long form, video content like this that could go on for half an hour, 40 minutes. I think it's missed
Mhm.
opportunity. They're not looking at long form written content. LinkedIn articles and the newsletters that are coming out are really powerful, and people are consuming long form content on LinkedIn where they wouldn't on other channels. So if you're just posting, the average post that looks like a Facebook post, it's a missed opportunity for brands. And yeah, so that's a big trend, long form for 2024. Speaking of collaboration, influencer marketing. So I've been in this game for a long time. I started out 10 years ago as an independent content creator, and it's only grown every year. What do you see for 2024 in terms of partnerships, opportunities, channels, and more?
I'm really optimistic about it. I'm seeing more and more uh, curiosity about it now than I have in the past. I mean, I think since the pandemic, that's kind of been increasing more quickly than it had been. It was sort of a slow incremental increase. Now it's much more rapid. Um, I think that the power of this stuff is starting to dawn on a lot of people, and they're starting to figure out, wow, we have to be in this, or somebody else is going to take our space from us before we're even able to make our way here. So I'm very optimistic about it all. I think that one of the things that's going to be interesting to watch, I'm curious about what you think about this, is that there's a sort of dichotomy emerging now between the word influencer and content creator. So people are now
Mm,
starting to identify, even in the B2B space, a little bit about, well, I'm more of a content creator than I am an influencer, or vice versa. And I think this is something that's coming over from the consumer side of the fence, where some people are more adamantly saying, well, I'm a content creator, I'm not an influencer, and or the other way around. So, what do you think of that? I'm just curious as to where your thoughts are there.
yeah, I think brands are getting more sophisticated. They're hiring people like you who kind of understand the landscape. The analyst relations role has kind of morphed into analyst and influencer
Mm,
relations. And with some of the tools on the analytics side and some improvements that have been made on LinkedIn, you can begin to measure impact in a way that you couldn't as well even a couple of years ago. And there are just so many channels that you just can't ignore some of these channels anymore. Even Twitter, X, is something some brands still ignore. They don't tweet or post or give it lip service. But you're missing a huge opportunity with media journalists, analysts, other thought leaders, even CIOs that are on LinkedIn. So if you ignore these platforms, or if you ignore Reddit or Quora, or TikTok, even you're potentially missing out on a huge opportunity to reuse and repurpose your content. So I think it's taking a more holistic, multi-channel approach, and including podcasting. People think,
mhm.
oh, there's so many podcasts, who's going to listen? Well, if you have an audience of three, four, 500 on your podcast, that's very targeted and very niche. That's well done. That's a great audience. And so, podcasting is alive and well. I mean, I don't know about you, but I listen to podcasts sort of in the background all day long. And it's how
Oh
I
yeah.
discover a lot of great content. And you have to kind of meet people where they are. Some people prefer audio content. You believe it or not, some people like to read. So you want the written word, and, video. We all consume video all day. So I think omni-channel, multi-channel is where it's at.
Oh yeah, I think so. You made a great point earlier about the articles on LinkedIn. I think every company should be building a library of content on their page with articles by their thought leaders, their spokespeople, what have you, because those articles are really favored in turn by search engines. So they pop up to the top of organic search quite often, and I think that's something that these companies really need to think about. Is that those I'm going to call them old fashioned pieces of long form content. Now, hark back to Tim Ferriss from many years ago from the Before Our Work Week fame. um, Tim used to say that he would produce articles and blog posts that he knew were not going to be popular now, or topics that were not popular now, but they would be a year, 2 years out.
Oh
So
wow.
he would look into the future a little bit and say, well, I think things are going to go in this direction. So I'm going to write about that now, and I'm going to publish that article out there now so that it it's going to matriculate into the search engines, and their algorithms going to pick it up, and I'm ahead of the curve that way. So I think anticipating where things are going and publishing content along those lines is really a good idea. Everybody likes future forward looking things. They are always very curious about what's going to happen, next year and 5 years from now and all that kind of good stuff. So if you can produce some content along those lines about where you think things are going to go, I don't think anybody's going to hold you to it and say, well, you didn't predict that correctly. I mean, for instance, don't ask me about my stock picks, because you don't want to be investing based on my stock picks. you know,
No, I'll
or
take that advice. That
yeah,
that's good
no,
advice.
don't take yeah, don't follow my stock ideas.
No, but long
So
form content is key, and I think brands they're kind of misunderstanding LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a media company now,
yeah,
so they're putting their maybe a little blurb about their blog with a link to their website, or they're posting a little snippet of a video with a link to YouTube. Or LinkedIn doesn't like links. It doesn't like preference content with links. It doesn't want people to leave LinkedIn. It wants them to stay there. So publish the
yeah.
whole blog on LinkedIn. Publish the whole 30-minute video on LinkedIn. Have the entire conversation there. Don't include off-site links. And if you do these things, you'll find the algorithm will reward you. What say you?
Oh, exactly. I mean, think of it from LinkedIn's point of view. They don't want you traveling, people traveling over to YouTube and all these other places for the content. They want it to reside there on LinkedIn so that you stay there. And you can't blame them for that. I mean, so take advantage of that. So that's why I say build a library of content for your company, on LinkedIn, right? You could do something similar on YouTube. You could do something similar on, Twitter even, so you can tailor the content for the specific platform, and you can allow your employees who wish to produce content for the company around different topics that they're passionate about, and encourage them to do so on these platforms as well. So that's the other part of this. It's sort of unleashing your employees and allowing them to uh, evangelize for the company, or for the industry or whatever, and
Yeah, it's
just
it's, it's amazing how many companies don't activate their employees, don't incentivize them, don't encourage, don't have employee activation tools, and don't gamify it. Don't have contests to see who can post the most, when, and where. And it's just a missed opportunity. Your employees, they should be your biggest advocates. And gosh, throw $100 gift card at them. Throw
Mhm.
incentives, and ask them to comment, like, share. It sounds so trite, but it's so true. And the companies that have done it well, like a Salesforce or IBM, or who've created an army of advocates, are just killing it on social media. And it's free media. It's free advocacy. So gamify it, have leaderboards and scoreboards and contests, and have fun with it. And the companies that are doing that are really differentiating themselves from the ones who aren't.
Yeah, I think it was some years back. It was Tom Feremsky, who used to be with the Financial Times and started what is it, Silicon Valley Angle, something like that, right?
Mm.
He said that every company out there had to become a media company to some extent. And this is true. This is really coming true. So if we think about it, every company out there is producing content as part of their marketing. So it's not just press releases anymore, or formal statements about things, or arranging for your spokespeople to speak at a conference. Those are all good things, and those are still really valid tools. But the LinkedIn Live, like we're doing right now, that's a whole nother avenue open to these companies, and it doesn't cost much. That's the other thing. And maybe it's just a little bit of time and energy to put some thoughts together and then hold the live, but it doesn't require tons and tons of investment to make it happen. And then to your point, incentivize your employees to write and to blog and to tweet and to do things just around what the company's doing. It doesn't have to be around all this other stuff that everybody gets in arguments about, like politics and all that stuff.
Mm.
Just keep it to business. Just keep it to the tech. Just keep it to what you guys are doing in that space and how you're helping people overcome challenges. And I think you'll see really good rewards out of that.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think there's been a lot of opening up around that. And, the economics just make sense. Like you said, I mean, advertising, paid social
Oh,
is just getting more and more expensive. Keywords, Google keywords cost a fortune now for some industries, some segments. And so the ROI on impressions and website referral traffic and views is just so obvious.
which all leads into demand gen, right?
Mm,
So people find these recorded videos of yours, and they might think, well, gee, we should engage Evan. Why don't we engage Evan? He's talking about these topics, or one of your guests. They could watch on there, and they could see, like, for me, for instance, even if it's 3 months later, they're watching this recorded version of this event. They might think, oh, gee, maybe we should contact Tom. I mean, and so that will all plays into the demand gen aspect, which these companies need to start figuring out, that all this stuff, once it's up there and it's findable, it's searchable, it's going to help the SEO, but even better, it's going to help the demand gen,
mm.
right? So that's where the real magic comes into play, I think. And
Oh, totally, totally. And I mean, this is on YouTube Live right now. It will live on YouTube and it will gain steam over 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 12 months. I get more reach in videos that are out there a year or two than I do that I made a month ago. And it's like, why is that? Isn't that stale content? No, this is the machine that Google YouTube has built. This is the power. So the people who are interested in influencer marketing and B2B marketing will be served up this content again and again and again. And that's why it's so powerful, for good and bad. Okay, there's some downsides to this kind of thing. But if you're not on these channels, you're not getting all the goodness that you described in terms of referral traffic and lead gen. And gosh, it's so much more powerful than webinars, these closed door webinars that the brands still love. They love getting those 20, 30, 100 email addresses. And okay, I don't fault them necessarily for that, but there's so much more you can do on the platform side beyond just collect email IDs. What do you think?
yeah, I think tools like webinars still have a place. There's no doubt about it. Although I am hearing that some people are a little fatigued on webinars, because webinars have become a little formulaic,
Mm,
in that they have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then there's a couple of turning points in there, and the turning points involve, okay, well, now we're going to begin to sell you. So we've given you this information, we've educated you a little bit, and now it's time to buy the package, right? And we're going to go through all the reasons why you need to buy now. And then, of course, we're going to give you this great discount if you see it through a little bit to the end. So I think people are a little tired of that, but the webinars still have a place. I think that where some of the stuff we're doing right now really ties into that is that if we started talking about a webinar on these LinkedIn Lives, let's say we were doing a LinkedIn Live every week or something, and we had a webinar next month, right? So every LinkedIn Live, we talk a little bit about the upcoming webinar, and like, you're going to learn 10x what you do on these LinkedIn Lives. We're gonna jam pack it full of this other information, and you actually give more than you're hoping to, like, sell people on,
mm,
and you'll see, I think, you'll see a great ROI on. I think you'll see a great ROI on that, because if you invest more in your audience and trust them a little bit and give them the benefit of the doubt, I think that you will you will bear a lot of fruit from that type of activity.
Yeah, I think ROI is another overused word. No offense, you marketeers out there, including Tom, but this constant chasing of ROI, it's like Gary Vaynerchuk says, well, what's the ROI of your mom? Like what? What does that mean? Well, how do you measure empathy and kindness and engagement? And there's just so many intangibles. And I think if you asked a lot of CMOs, like, what's the ROI of your marketing budget? They wouldn't be able to answer you, not because it's an impossible question. It's just because the networks these days are so complex and interrelated, and there's just so many billions of people. It's just really impossible to measure ROI in the traditional sense now. You just have to measure your reach, and you have to focus on community and engagement. And I think that's also where I'm really interested in focusing is engagement. It's often these smaller communities, the WhatsApp groups, the DM groups, the private groups, the semi curated closed door groups that are kind of some of the most interesting places these days where you get just a lot of the big opportunities come from, and WhatsApp groups come from these groups, and they're not necessarily public. You don't necessarily see the impact, but you're nurturing a community. It could be email lists as well. And I think there's a great opportunity for brands to leverage influencers and their private communities to kind of get the word out. I have hundreds of people in my private groups that are really a who's who of other thought leaders and influencers. And there's ways to communicate with them in a much more intimate way. And that includes to some platforms too, like, LinkedIn groups. There are some that are really interesting now and aren't just spam. There's some Reddit groups that are really smaller, interesting. Quora and some
Yeah.
other communities that are popping out, even private Slack groups that you can request to join. Some Facebook groups are really still pretty good. So it's not just about, the big wins. It's like lots of small wins. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the there's a desire on the part of marketers to want to be able to measure everything. And to your point, I mean, maybe it's a little hyperbolic, but it's like, how do you measure the impact of your mother? Well, you know, she brought me into the world, all these other things. It's you can't really. So it's like, how do you measure the impact of a friendship?
Mm,
You know, you can't really. So the part of the demand gen that I'm talking about here is just what you're doing a better job of elaborating on than I am. And it's the Quora groups, it's the private Slack groups, it's the private DM groups, it's even on Signal or on these other
mm,
apps, where people set up little conversations going on and with people they trust or know, or and sometimes they want to keep it smaller and a little more intimate that way so they can really share some information there. Because let's face it, people don't like to share what they don't know with the
mm.
wider world, because then they think, well, they're going to think I don't know what I'm talking about and whatever. And then, I'm not the expert that I'm portraying myself to be. Well, nobody knows everything. That's the whole point, right? So nobody has all the answers, right? Usually it's the community around you that you surround yourself with that really makes you great. It's not what you know necessarily, but it's the community that you're a part of that's able to uplift you. And I think people inherently understand this, and that's why they form communities. And from a marketing standpoint, this stuff is not measurable, right? So if I'm a CMO at XYZ Corporation, I can't necessarily measure, well, what's the value of Evan Kirstel having a private conversation with some of my spokespeople inside of a private, well, I can't measure that. That's not measurable, right? But you could have imparted some really serious information to them. They could have come back, to the organization with it and said, hey, we should probably think about doing this instead of that. And the impact of that right there alone could be huge. Or
Yeah,
it
it's
could
it's
be
sort
like
of like
somebody else.
in-person events too. I mean,
Yeah,
they're notoriously tough to measure the value of networking and cocktail parties, but we recognize that even with the pandemic, we need that in person advantage, and we need community, whether it's offline
Yeah,
or online. And so,
right.
would totally agree with you there. What are you most excited about for next year in terms of influencer trends and opportunities? Any last sort of thought on what's top of mind?
We can't avoid it, Evan. It's Chat GPT and AI. Right? I mean, it's the elephant in the room everywhere for every industry. I think it's like, well, what does this mean for the industry? And I think it means really positive things. I mean, I've been experimenting with Chat GPT a little bit too, and I do find it has some really good utility. Um, what I wouldn't do is use it as a crutch. So I wouldn't think, gee, I need to pump out an article every week on my blog, and I'm just going to go to Chat GPT and have it develop it, and then I'm just going to take that and I'm going to put that. That's not going to do you any favors. And I think that anybody who experiments with these tools, or Bard, Chat GPT, whatever it happens to be, I think you're able to pretty quickly, the human eye is able to pretty quickly discern what's been generated by a human and what hasn't been, because these tools have a tendency to sort of use the same phrasing over and over again. I help monitor a group or administer a group on LinkedIn called Micro Influencer Marketing. And I whenever I see somebody who's just obviously used one of these tools to generate a post so they can just slap it in there, I reject it. And so do the other administrators in there, because I mean, that's not doing us a favor in the group. It's not doing the other group members a favor. It's like, put some thought behind it. I understand you want to get a jump start on generating some content. That's cool. That's fine. But then insert your own thinking into it. And if you have to change the whole thing around to really make it what you want it to be, then so be it, do it. Because that is really what's going to make you stand out from the crowd. It's your own individuality and thinking and ideas and insights and experiences that really is what's going to separate you from the pack.
No, and
Um,
I think that's totally fair. The flip side of that is personal GPT. So I uploaded every podcast, blog, YouTube video, and tweet into a private GPT, Evan GPT, and now people can go on and interact with Evan GPT and ask me questions and
I think
interact.
that's awesome.
Brands will have their own personal GPTs, brand
Oh yeah,
GPTs, and as well as individuals. So again, it's like using the tools creatively, like your own private
yeah,
GPT, using Dolly to create really fun, exciting imagery with your posts, or using not Chat GPT, but other tools that do certain things better, differently. Again, it's given me just superpowers. Like I feel I have a team of about 8 working for me now when it comes to pushing out content, editing videos, rewriting blogs,
that's
even
where
taking a blog, creating tweets from the blog. I mean, just so many time saving and brand enhancing advantages.
Yeah, I think that's where the real magic is at, man. It's like how can I make my workflows a little easier? How can I kind of double down on this without having to put in necessarily double the hours, right? That's where these tools really come in handy, and they're really fun to experiment with. But just don't use it, like I said, as a crutch, as something that's just going to do it all, and you don't have to really think about it too much and whatever. That's not what you want to do. You want to stay on top of all this stuff. So you want to make sure that all the Evan GPT is doing what it's supposed to be doing, right? So you're going to be looking in on it. So I think that's where it's all at. I think some from an influencer marketing standpoint, I think some of these tools are really great at helping you identify some influencers in your space that might
Mm.
be worthwhile, connecting with. I think the other thing to keep in mind, and this is something I've been talking about for a number of years now, it's like it's not the number of influencers you're working with. It's the quality of the influencers you are working with, right? So it's better to work with two, three, four, five influencers in a given year build relationships with those people, really produce some high quality content that's going to resonate not only now, but going forward for a good period of time, and continue to work with those people and then add other influencers into the mix as needed, right? So it's not like the consumer side where it's like, well, I need 1,000 influencers to, you know, pump out information about my new sneaker product or something like that.
Mm,
That's not the way to do it on the B2B side. The B2B side is much more, you got to be a little bit more considerate about it. You got to think a little bit more deeply about, well, who do I want to engage? How long do I want to engage with them? Let's build some relationships here, not just producing content together, but like if I was going to engage you with a client, I'd say, well, Evan, what could you help us with some social promotion for a couple of months around an initiative we're coming out with, and then we're going to have an event, and maybe we have you come to the event, and you could moderate a panel while there, and maybe you could interview a couple of different people that are there, not just industry, not just our spokespeople, but maybe a customer, a partner. You could have a really cool interaction with people like that, and so it's think about how you can work with the influencers on a much more holistic level. It's not just about we need a blog post done, we need an article done. That's fine, but let's think about how we can work together going forward a bit more, because the influencers like you speak to a lot of different people out there, a lot of different companies, and you're seeing different activities and ideas executed on every day. And you can bring those insights back to the company that you're working with and saying, hey, maybe you should try this. Maybe you should try that. I've seen this work really well. I've seen that work, but I've seen those other things not work so well. So you might want to stay away from those things. Yeah. And those insights can save time, energy, money, and then they can also produce fantastic results. I've seen that time and time again. I've seen influencers bring back insights on products. When I was still with HP, I remember influencers coming back with thoughts on, the next laptop product. They'd review it, they'd like it, and
mm.
everything else. They'd say, hey, you guys should think about changing the keyboard around a little bit and moving this key over here because of X, Y, Z reasons. And and then HP was smart enough to actually do some of that. And the
That's
customer
such a
base
great
loved it.
point.
And then the influencers, of course, loved it because they was like, hey, they actually listened to us, and we were able to help improve the product, right? So that just benefits everybody.
I love it. That's such a great point. I mean, there is a role for the promoters, the unboxers, the guys and gals
Oh, sure.
who are on that side of the house, but it really is about educational content in B2B and providing insights and analysis and, differentiated, unique perspectives. And yeah, no, I'm super excited about next year. Going to be lots of opportunity, lots of travel. What's on your radar once we're through the new year? Anything coming up?
Oh, there's lots of things coming up. I think a lot of my clients have events. They're getting
Mhm.
much. They're kind of going full bore back into the physical events again, which I think is good. I might have to do some travel for some of that, but more importantly, I'm thinking in terms of like what kind of what influencers should they be thinking about working with and partnering with on some of these activities, because I think there's going to be more and more opportunity here, like than we've ever even considered before. And it's hard for me to sort of put into words, but it's just sort of a feeling I have about going into 24. I think we're going to see some really exciting stuff, and I think we're going to see some influencers, really new ones, kind of come up, that have been percolating out there for a while. I think they're building their audiences, and they're doing the right things, and they're going to become more and more prominent, and it's just exciting to me. I love it.
Yeah, such a fascinating and dynamic space and so fun. And it's great chatting with you, Tom. Thanks so much for the update and the insights. And everyone watching, reach out to Tom and follow him on social. I'll be adding his tags to the video. And thanks for watching. Reach out with any questions or comments. Have a great new year, Tom, and everyone watching.
Oh, likewise, man. I enjoyed it. Let's do it again sometime soon.
We must. All right.